Now with Eyewitness Sports, Scott Cody.
Winning today in Chicago not only kept the Saints' very slim playoff hopes alive, it would give them something to smile about heading into the offseason were they not to make the playoffs. Now the Saints are left with no postseason and no smiles. Much like last year in the NFC Championship game, turnovers leading to an early deficit. Kyle Orton to Mark Bradley, 19 yards for the score, 10-0 Bears in front. Still in the first, Sean Payton and the Saints, not much luck on fourth downs today. Drew Brees has his pass batted down, 1 for 4 on fourth downs this afternoon for the Saints. Second quarter now, Saints at the goal line. Pierre Thomas stuffed twice. The offensive line unable to get a push. The Saints call timeout. They regroup and they say, let's do what we do best. Brees to Marcus Colston, 3 yards on the fade pattern, 10-7 Saints within 3. But on the Bears' ensuing possession, they open up the playbook. The halfback pass, Brian Berrien from Adrian Peterson, and the Bears quickly go back up by 10. But the Saints would answer. 8 plays, 69 yards. Drew Brees to Marcus Colston. Colston 8 catches, 94 yards for him today. He'd leave with a wrist injury, though, and wouldn't return. Still in the second quarter, Devin Hester, the Bears trying to find ways to get him the ball. Well, the best way to do that against the Saints is go deep. 55 yards, 24-14, Chicago back on top. More Hester in the third quarter. It's a 7-point game now. The Saints mistakenly kicked to the NFL's most dangerous return man. This, his 6th return for a score this year. His 11th of his career, in Chicago up 14. Third quarter, another failed fourth down attempt, another tip ball at the line. Bears take over. Sean Payton, his frustration runneth over. Bright spot for the Saints. End of the game. Pierre Thomas, a touchdown grab. It gets the, gets the Saints within 8 after the 2-point conversion, but the Saints can't get the onside kick. 33-25, Pierre Thomas becomes the first Saints running back to eclipse 100 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving in the same game, and he does it in his first ever NFL start. Nonetheless, it was all in a losing effort. The Saints' Super Bowl hopes have been relegated to a 7-9 overall record.
Yeah, it's different teams, different circumstances. You know, we're an NFC Championship game and 7-9, so there's some irony, I think, you know, that the season ended here, but. You know, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and to start this off season, free agency, and the draft, and that's where our focus is going to be in improving this team and getting ourselves back into the postseason next year where we belong. But you know, and that's basically what I told the team. You know, we'll meet tomorrow and kind of cover the off-season procedures, and you know, there's no one in there that feels real good about 7-9.
You know, obviously, had we won this game today, we still might have had an opportunity in the playoffs. So I think there would still be a sense of excitement, you know, as we board this plane to head back to New Orleans, just thinking that when we land, we might, you know, hear the surprising news that, you know, we're in the playoffs. But obviously we know that's not the case, just like we knew our season was over last year after this game, and that's disappointing.
Well, what if the Saints had won, and what happened to
Catch what's coming up next on Fourth Down.
The season ends on the same field as last year, but the 2007 season had a much different tone than 2006. What happened to the boys in black and gold, and what changes need to be made to get back to the postseason? Fourth Down tackles those subjects right now.
This is the last word on sports. Fourth Down on 4.
Welcome into Fourth Down. I'm Scott Cody. Well, no more what-ifs, no more one game at a time, no more cliches. The Saints season is over. Some would say mercifully. Most everyone would say prematurely. On the same field where the Saints ended their most successful campaign in franchise history, 1 year later, they would end their most disappointing one. Soldier Field, it'll be on the schedule again next year. Maybe a win will come then, but not today. Kyle Orton in the first quarter hits Michael Bradley, 19-yard touchdown, 10-0 Chicago, taking advantage of some early Saints turnovers. The Saints would get on the board, however, in the second quarter. Drew Brees to Marcus Colston. Colston would leave the game, though, with a wrist injury. His day cut short, but not before the Saints cut the Bears' lead to just 3. Third quarter now. The Saints tried to punt the ball out of bounds because Devin Hester was on the receiving end of them. They didn't punt it out of bounds on this play, and Hester makes them pay. 64 yards on the return, 31-17. The Bears move in front for good. Sean Payton would later get into Steve Weatherford's ear and, well, told him something, I'm sure. 4 times the Saints went for it on 4th down today, and only once they made it. That's just one of the many factors that led to the Saints' loss today.
Towards the end of that second quarter, and I felt we were moving the football pretty well, be it in the running game and in play action. But again, they made some big plays, sack fumbles, forced some turnovers, and it's something they do a very good job at. So, those turnovers end up being critical. Punt return for a touchdown. Those are things that get you beat. And in the end, when you lose a couple touchdowns, you just go back and look at the turnovers and hidden yardage in the kicking game, and it's pretty simple. We give up a big play in the passing game. One of our objectives coming in was to keep the ball in front of us, and we score, and then 3-4 plays later they're in the end zone. Those are all things that good teams don't do, and mistakes that good teams don't make, and those are things that we've got to look hard at in this offseason.
Really haven't digested it all yet. It'll probably hit me tomorrow, and it's just been a tough one.
It absolutely was an uphill climb. We were never able to get above that 500 mark. We started off 0-4 and then went to 4-4, and then at one point we're 5-7 and then made it to 7-7, but we're never able to eclipse just getting over the hump. It felt like we were just chasing uphill the whole time.
Brees threw the ball 60 times today. He completed 35 of those, his 443 completions this season, an NFL record. Pierre Thomas, a huge day for him in his first career NFL start. Jim Henderson with more on his record-setting day coming up later in the show. Before he got hurt, Colston grabbed 8 catches, 94 yards. He hauled in 98 passes this season. That's a franchise record. And his 168 grabs in 2 years is the most by any player in NFL history in their first 2 seasons. Second on that list is Reggie Bush with 161. Well, from the first game of the season, the Saints were exposed, whether it be the deep ball or pressure on the quarterback to untimely penalties. We look back on the season that was supposed to be, but never was.
Caught and then dropped, and then it's picked up by Jason David, who takes it away from Reggie Wayne. And
hope still sprung eternal back in Week 1, especially after the Saints' offseason quick fix at cornerback. Jason David forced a fumble and then returned it for a score. New Orleans went into halftime tied with the defending Super Bowl champs. The Colts, though, scored 31 unanswered in the second half, temporarily bursting the Saints' super bubble.
Disappointed? Yeah, absolutely. Is the season over? Heck no. It's one game.
But one game then turned into 4, during which the Saints lost not only their leading rusher, but their leader as well.
I didn't want to believe it, but just taking that walk to the locker room, you could feel it just kind of giving it away a little bit.
At 0-3, the Saints' season was starting to get away. Then came the bye week, and after that, another loss, their 4th in a row, an apparent win. All the Saints needed was a chip shot field goal to take a 2-possession lead. Disappointment gave way to frustration.
You get in that situation, it's pretty much a guaranteed win, but I guess we proved today that it's not.
They also proved they hadn't thrown in the towel. On the road in Seattle, everyone needs a little luck sometimes, and the Saints got theirs when Eric Johnson, rather than a Seattle defender, recovered David Patton's fumble. The next week against the Falcons produced a second straight win, but at 2-4, the Saints were still digging. A trip to San Francisco finally produced Drew Brees' first 300-yard game of the year, and along with it, a 3rd straight win.
They say that 3 wins, that starts the streak, so hopefully we'll keep the streak going for a while.
Mike McKenzie and the Saints defense helped the Saints get back to 500 with a win over the Jaguars. 4 down, followed by 4 up, left the Saints in the middle of the road.
We got a long ways to go. I mean, we're 4-4 right now, and that record doesn't put you anywhere.
But any momentum gained was quickly stunted when the winless Rams shredded the Saints secondary for their first win of the year. In a matchup heralded as number 1 versus number 2, will be remembered more for Bush's fumble at the goal line. 4-4 was now 4-6.
We fought so hard to get to 500, and now we're back to 2 games down. So, hopefully, I don't think we're out of it yet. We just gotta, we gotta win out.
4 forced turnovers against the Panthers a week later got the Saints back into the win column, and another win against the Buccaneers would have put the Saints within 1 game of the division lead. But with 3.5 minutes left and a 3-point lead, the Saints' season might have been defined in one play.
Reggie Bush, prospect, loose ball.
Hindsight, it's something that I'd have done differently.
The Saints not only lost that game, they would lose their second running back of the season as well. Reggie Bush's busted knee kept him sidelined for the final 4 games. New Orleans kept it interesting, though, clawing back to 500 with wins over the Falcons on the road and back home against the Cardinals. Their bird-hunting expedition, however, backfired against the Eagles. Second and goal from the 6-inch line for the Saints turned into 7 points for Philadelphia.
It's kind of like a 14-point swing, you know, and that was the turning point.
But not the end. The Saints still had slim, very slim playoff hopes heading into today's game with the Bears. But even still, what had been Super Bowl hopes became a wild card pipe dream.
We're not worried about any equations or anything like that. We got pride, and that's what we're playing for right now is pride.
And after today, their pride is still intact. The Saints fought until the end, scoring with 7 seconds left in the game. But their playoff hopes are not.
You just want to end the season on a high note, you know, regardless of what your record is. If we were to win today and not make the playoffs, we say, hey, you know, we gave it our best there in the end. We ended on a high note. Now let's just build on this moving towards next year.
Well, just 17 weeks ago, there were so many possibilities surrounding the Saints. Now, there are so many questions. Bobby Hebert helps us continue to break down the Saints' 2007 season and beyond. This was supposed to be next year, the year the Saints were finally going to go to the Super Bowl. With all of the hype heading into the season and the big egg this team laid, was this the most disappointing season in franchise history?
Without a doubt, simply because they were 1 game away from the Super Bowl. I think they have the right quarterback. They have a franchise quarterback in Drew Brees. But it just shows you they have to have the better pieces around them. And I still take the approach that even as good as your offense is, you still got to have that, so to speak, championship-type defense.
How did this season turn into the same chapter Saints fans have read time and time again? Instead of the happy ending they've watched other teams have.
I think the old giveaway takeaway ratio, you talk about that. I mean, if you're not on the plus side, it's hard to win 10 or 11 games because of the parity in the league. So I think that definitely came into play. And the defense basically going from number 12 last year to number 29. And the offense, going from number 1 to number 5, they kind of kept pace. And I think the injury to Deuce McAllister not having that balance and the running game consistent.
The offseason will bring about more questions, with fans awaiting the correct answers. Can Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton rekindle the magic they achieved in 2006?
Mickey Loomis wouldn't have won Executive of the Year for nothing. I mean, that don't happen, by chance. I think it's all a combination of Mickey Loomis, the whole organization, and Coach Payton all being on the same page and, and getting the job done. And, it's kind of like you had one great year, and you had this year that wasn't so good. So then you're constantly being evaluated. I really don't take the approach as far as, a coach's decision, this and that. I think, players have to get the job done on the field. I mean, the coaches are quality enough, good enough, but you got to have the horses.
While Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, and Mike McKenzie had Pro Bowl-worthy seasons, Hebert believes too many others didn't earn their paycheck or just weren't suited to be starting in the NFL. So which players or positions need changing?
Obviously, Jason David. I mean, as much as Fred Thomas got exploited, I mean, you can't say that Jason David was an upgrade to Fred Thomas. And this is going to be interesting in free agency is losing Mike McKenzie. With a knee injury, I mean, he's not going to be ready to play at the beginning of next year. So here you had a solid cornerback. Now you have 2 cornerbacks. Who's going to step to the forefront and get the job done? I really think there's a place in the NFL for a Mark Semino at middle linebacker or even a Scott Shanley. But to say as a starter, I think that area definitely needs to be upgraded. So you can look at, those 2 positions as far as a number 2 receiver to Marcus Colston. I mean, I think Lance Moore, even Devery Henderson, they all can contribute. But to truly be that number 2 guy, I don't see that right now.
So what are the biggest needs for the Saints heading into 2008? Unanimously, I think you can go around and figure out that it's defensive backs, plural, the most pressing concern. Linebacking help, number 2 on our list, followed by a pass rusher. The Saints managed only 32 sacks as a team this season, tied for 19th in the NFL. An aging interior defensive line could use some young playmakers as well. Still ahead on this edition of Fourth Down, Jim Henderson will focus on one of the few bright spots for the Saints today in Chicago. Plus, this season had a similar feeling to 2001. We'll break down how and why coming up. And Chris Paul has the Hornets on a 5-game win streak. We'll show you how they put the clamps on King James and earned win number 20 last night. All that and more is on the way. Welcome back into Fourth Down. Well, expectations for this year's Saints team exceeded any in the club's history. In fact, the only time hopes were even close to being this high, you might have to go back to the 2001 season. And if you take a closer look at each of those campaigns, the similarities are very hard to ignore. The Saints' 2000 season was a landmark one, which included a division title, the first playoff win in franchise history, Coach of the Year, and front office honors. Eerily similar to the 2006 season, which brought another division title, a conference championship game appearance, along with accolades honoring players, coaches, and management. The 01 season started 4-2. It seemed to take a turn for the worse after one very notorious on-field incident.
And now Turley throws the helmet.
After Turley's helmet toss, the Saints would finish just 3-7. And it could have been one play that changed this season.
Reggie Bush, loose ball. Did the Bucks recover?
The Saints ended up losing to the Buccaneers and dropped their last 2 games, keeping them out of the playoffs. Each team finished a disappointing 7-9 due to the main problem for both teams, playing from behind, with both defenses giving up more than 24 points a game. The offseason brought changes for the 02 Saints. Randy Mueller was out as GM, Ricky Williams was traded to Miami, and the Saints would finish above 500 just once over the next 4 seasons. What's in store for the upcoming offseason? Only time will tell. The moves to be made will likely shape the franchise for years to come. One of those important decisions will most likely involve the future of Pierre Thomas. The first glimpse Saints fans got of the undrafted rookie running back was this preseason. The game against Kansas City, Thomas picked up a pair of touchdowns and mop-up duty in that 30-7 win. And as Jim Henderson reports, the Illinois product did better than even he thought he could do today in his first ever NFL start.
Every fan who'd been saying since preseason that Pierre Thomas deserved to see more playing time all year long may now repeat after me. I told you so. All the free agent out of Illinois did today was more than every other running back in Saints history had ever done.
Record-breaking year.
With 105 yards rushing and 121 yards receiving, Thomas became the first running back in Saints history to surpass the century mark in both categories in the same game. His 226 total yards were the 3rd most total yards in a game by a back in Saints history. His coach was impressed.
I was proud of him. You know, Aaron was able to dress, but still wasn't 100%. And I thought he ran the ball real well today. Tough conditions. He had some hard yards, and you know, when you watched him finish runs, that was encouraging. So there's some bright spots. Yeah, he's one of them.
And Thomas was justifiably proud of himself.
I'm very happy, you know, of what I accomplished this season. You know, I never thought this would happen. Never. You know, just being an undrafted free agent honestly, I didn't think I had a chance of making a team. But I told myself, hey, anything is possible. Go out there and work hard. And I'm just happy right now.
He blocked, he caught, he ran, and he ran through one of the best linebackers in the league in Brian Urlacher on more than one occasion.
They said I was a tough guy. You know, they said they got a whole lot of respect for me. They said I might look like a little guy, but I run like I'm about 260. I really appreciate it. And Urlacher, my first time going against him, that man hit hard. He gave me a couple of shots out there. I was a little dazed, but hey, I wanted to get back up and keep fighting, tell him to keep bringing it.
From the very bottom of the depth chart, Thomas became the only running back to carry the football for the Saints all day long. He played in place of #1 draft choices, Deuce McAllister and Reggie Bush. And in his combined performance today, he did what neither has ever done.
He's one of these steady backs, and you know, he's only a rookie. I mean, this is his first game to, you know, start. So, you know, imagine with time and with experience, you know, the type of player this guy can be.
As the season ends, a career perhaps begins for the longest of preseason long shots. In Chicago, Jim Henderson, 4th down on 4.
Well, coming up, the King was dethroned in the arena last night. We'll take a look at.
With high hopes and a lot of low lows, the 2007 Saints season has come to an end. 2006, such a good year, and high hopes for the 2007 season. It was just a very big disappointment.
Well, it was tough at Soldier Field in Chicago yesterday. And
it was like deja vu all over again.
Well, to give us his analysis, Bobby Hebert is here, and I guess it was kind of tough for you to watch it yesterday.
Yeah, it was tough because at least you want to give your team a chance, you know, to go to the playoffs. Yeah. You always want to end on a positive note. So yeah, especially the last 2 weeks against the Eagles and the Bears, you know, the Saints seem like they're going in a different direction than, you know, building for something for the future.
And it would have been much better to get in the playoffs in another way than trying to limp in like that.
Right. I mean, you know, realistically, the way the Redskins played, they deserve to be in the playoffs. The way they took care of the Cowboys, they won 4 straight. And so for the Saints to get in, even though we beat Seattle in Seattle, I think it would have been a totally different animal this time around, where I think the Redskins have a better opportunity to beat Seattle you know, in Seattle.
There were some bright spots yesterday, Drew Brees and Pierre Thomas.
And Marcus Colston.
Yeah, you look at Colston the first half, and then he had the wrist injury. He didn't play the second half. But Pierre Thomas, I mean, he just look at his effort. I mean, it was unbelievable. Given the opportunity, he wasn't overwhelmed. You know, he's the first running back in Saints history in one game to have over 100 yards receiving and rushing the football.
And Bobby, a lot of people ask, you know, why every time we get a big draft choice like a Reggie Bush or a Ricky Williams or whatever, they never seem to pan out the way we hope. And then you get a guy like Marcus Colston, who was a late draft,
7th-round pick.
And then Pierre Thomas, who you know, was overlooked for a long time.
Well, if you look at 2 of the players that have contributed, you know, even in the Bears game, here you got Pierre Thomas, a free agent. Marcus Colston almost like a free agent.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, realistically, it might even long-term now looks like Mario Williams, who the Texans took, might be a better pick than Reggie Bush. I mean, you look at his sack production, but overall, I mean, we got to do something on the defensive side of the football. I think we have the right quarterback, we have the franchise quarterback, but defensively,
Drew's numbers are incredibly impressive.
Yeah, actually, he also set an NFL record, breaking Rich Gannon's record of 2002 completions in a season. So, I mean, I think we have a good enough offense to win a championship, but the defense, we were number 12 last year. Going into the Bears game, we were 29th. No, you're not going to win any kind of championship. You can't afford to be in a track meet week in and week out. I mean, you score like 23 points or more, you should be able to win every game. And defensively, we just did not get better. And it's going to be interesting to see, you know, free agency, the draft, what direction we go. I take the approach as far as a cornerback. When I was playing quarterback, I'd love to go against a rookie cornerback every game. So I think you got to address that in free agency. And then I think more in the draft, maybe the linebacker approach. But, you know, there's Marcus Trufant out there, who's I think actually from Bell Chase. Plays with the Seattle Seahawks. He had 9 interceptions going into the game yesterday. So, you know, that kind of guy, Asante Samuel, you're going to have to pay the big bucks, but here's guys that have skins on the wall.
And what about some of the coaching decisions? Because, you know, when you're 4th and 2 and you're within field goal range, would it have been better to kick sometimes instead of going for the...
Well, a lot of times when we're going for it on 4th down because we feel like we have to get a touchdown. It was very similar when the game...
But at least a field goal is something.
But it was very similar, though, in the Eagles game where we're only up, 24-17? Early in the 3rd quarter. We're right there inside the 1-yard line. we could have made it 24-20, but it's like, well, Coach Payton, I think, is not confident the defense could stop him. So we need a touchdown to kind of keep pace, and I think that's been kind of the scenario where there's not that confidence in the defense that we're going to come up with those consistent stops, or no, we're going to have to almost outscore an opponent.
Well, let's see. For next year, are we going to need the tissue for, I can't even put this up. We're going to need the tissue for the second line or for wiping away the tears?
Well, right now, I mean, maybe it might be a good thing. I think the expectations with being only one game away from the Super Bowl, I think maybe going into next year, you might not have as high expectations. But I think until they address the defense, they're truly a 500 team. You know, there's not much difference with the parity in the league. It's an old cliche between, 10-6, of 7-9. There's not much difference. So we got to have more playmakers. We got to get more guys to step to the forefront.
And Reggie Bush, once he comes back healthy next year, we can expect some pretty big things from him, don't you think?
Well, you hope so. But I mean, I think the jury's still out on him. I mean, for him to be the featured back, I don't think that's the answer. When Deuce McAllister went down and they put Reggie as the featured back, I mean, I think he needs to do what Reggie does and not try and take Deuce's place. Like, you utilize more like Pierre Thomas or Aaron Stecker in Deuce's role and then let Reggie do his thing. But as far as him being the featured tailback, running between the tackles, running 20, 25 times a game, I mean, I don't think Reggie can get it done in that area. It goes back to USC when he was with Lindell White. They had a 2 running back situation last year with Deuce, how that worked out. And that has to be the focus. I think Reggie Bush, not the featured back, but definitely utilize him on special teams.
Yeah.
You see him with Devin Hester.
I mean, he's a talented athlete.
No, he's very talented. You want to get him the ball in space. But, 2 things Reggie has to do. This year, work out with the team in the offseason. None of this prima donna stuff that I'm going to go do my own thing. Actually accomplish something great, then do the international commercials. Don't get the cart before the horse.
Well,
you can't turn the money down.
I know you can't turn it down, but you still got to produce.
Quickly, will the Patriots go all the way?
That's going to be a lot of pressure on them, but I think they can handle it. The way they came back in the Giants game, down basically, well into the second half, with like 10 points. And then
anybody can do it, this team can.
Yeah, they can, but it's going to be a lot of pressure. And, it's a shame the great season that they did have going undefeated. If they don't win the Super Bowl, people are going to still look at them like, oh, they choked. No, they didn't choke, but I think they have, the main guys, Tom Brady, Coach Belichick, they have the right formula to get the job done because they're so mature as a football team.
Well, I'm cheering for one of those Manning brothers to come through.
Oh, that could happen.
That'd be good. Like to see the 2 Mannings in the Super Bowl. All right, don't forget, Jim Henderson has his commentary on the Saints coming up at 6 o'clock tonight. You don't want to miss that. And more music coming after this. Stay right there.
Saints end the season on a losing streak, huh?
Yeah, 2 games that cost them a shot at the playoffs. The Saints had plenty of opportunities this season to control their own destiny. Unfortunately, they controlled it by losing when presented with most of those opportunities. Juan Kincaid with more on the postmortem from Saints camp.
From Super Bowl hopeful to playoff no-show. Once again, it's another season of wait till next year for these Saints and their fans. And there are many reasons as to why this team won't be making a second straight appearance in the postseason.
We didn't do a good enough job protecting the football. Defensively, we didn't do a good enough job avoiding the big plays. There's too many big plays, both in the passing game and then when you look at a simple check down yesterday on 3rd and 26 that gets a first down. Those are plays, whether it's above our head or in front of us for the first down, that we weren't as good as we would have liked, obviously. So I think our return game and the kicking game needs to improve.
Obviously turnovers. That's something that has really bit us the last 2 years. I mean, we've finished both these last 2 years minus in the giveaway takeaway ratio, which when you look at the great teams, the teams that go on and win championships and are going to the playoffs year in and year out, that's not a problem they have, so that's something that needs to be solved on our end.
Speaking of which, Payton believes the next 3 to 4 weeks will be critical in the shaping of this football team for next season. But he said don't expect any wholesale changes to player personnel. With the Saints, I'm Juan Kincaid, Channel 4 Eyewitness Sports.
Former Saint.
History repeats itself.
Yes, unfortunately, that's true. Just like the beginning of the Jim Haslett era, the beginning of the Sean Payton era began with a 10-6 record, a playoff appearance, and Coach of the Year honors. The next year, reality slapped them upside the head. The Saints went 7-9 in the second years of both eras, and each quickly had to acknowledge that they hadn't reinvented the wheel.
I've been in this long enough to know that I'm not taking that for granted. I can appreciate the challenges of getting in the postseason and understand the difficulties of getting in the postseason. And then the second year, the up and down swing of how we've been able to play, of 1 week playing real well, being smart with the football, then the next week maybe not playing as well. That's probably the most frustrating in the second year.
Georgia Tech 28. As the ball was kicked off in Indianapolis on September 6th, I remember telling our radio listeners that the most anticipated season in Saints history is underway. As the final gun sounded in Chicago on December 30th, I remember thinking that the most disappointing season in Saints history is over. Most anticipated because of what was expected, most disappointing because of what was delivered. Now looking back, it's much easier to pinpoint the contributing problems than it was to predict them before that opening kickoff. The first three of those season-opening 4 losses that killed the Saints would be to teams that are today in the playoffs. The fourth would be to David Carr and the Carolina Panthers. 3 of the 9 losses the Saints would suffer would be to teams quarterbacked by David Carr, Luke McCown, and Kyle Orton. Who knew some of those guys were still alive? Saint free agent acquisitions didn't help until it was too late. For much of the season, you wondered why were some guys playing who were, and why were other guys not playing who weren't? Insert the names Jason David, Kevin Case-Vaharn, and Pierre Thomas where applicable. Trades didn't help. They netted Olindo Mare and Antonio Pittman. The draft didn't supply one player who heretofore has had a single positive impact on the team. You know it's not a good sign when your starting quarterback Drew Brees would finish the season with 2 more receptions than your #1 draft choice, wide receiver Robert Meacham. You'd have to go back to the 2003 draft when Jonathan Sullivan was the #1 pick to find one of comparable immediate ineffectuality. Projected breakout seasons by the likes of Reggie Bush, Charles Grant, and Devery Henderson never happened. During a season in which an NFL record 42 kicks were returned for touchdowns, the Saints returners didn't produce any that threatened the end zone, and few that even quickened the pulse. Maybe that's where Reggie Bush fits in next season. Figuring out where he does most beneficially for the team will be a critical element of off-season personnel decisions. Those were the last 2 coaches of the year matching wits yesterday in Lovie Smith and Sean Payton, whose teams would both finish 7-9 while being perceived as 2 of the most disappointing teams in the NFL. Now, neither got stupid overnight. The challenge now for each is to get smarter by learning from their unexpected adversity. Like the Bears, the Saints were a team that began the season with great expectation, only to end it with the realization that they weren't as good as they, us, and most everybody else thought they would be. And that's Look at Sports.
So a question of using the talent more effectively, is that basically it?
I think there are a lot of things that contributed to it. I think figuring out how they're going to use Reggie Bush next year will be a big part of it. They seem to have discovered somebody in Pierre Thomas, how much they can build on him, how much Deuce McAllister can contribute in coming back. All those things remain to be seen.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Happy New Year, Jim.
You too.
We had some sun.